Welcome back, top performer. I have a question for you. Do you know what your market salary range is? Most people guess at this, but they don't go unprepared when negotiating or accepting an offer. Instead, most employees rely on their employer, which usually means they're at a disadvantage and leaving money on the table versus negotiating from a position of power with the facts on their side. In this video, I'm going to show you how to determine your market value so you can have data equal or better than that of your employer. The majority of companies don't want employees to know what their true market value is because it saves them thousands of dollars in the short term. But this can be short-sighted and it can hurt them in the long run because while employers might think they're getting a good deal by paying less than market value, it actually may limit their talent pool and increase turnover. So while they may prefer you don't do what I'm about to recommend, it actually benefits them in the long run. It's like we're helping them. The other issue with pay is that it isn't an exact science. Two people doing very similar work could see a discrepancy of $5,000, $10,000, or $20,000. I've seen even greater. Generally, these discrepancies are due to negotiating when they were hired into the role, or sometimes just making up a number since they were coming from an outside company and, well, the company didn't know whether or not that was true or not and matched that rate. Either way you look at it, that is a form of negotiating. No judgment here. Second is when somebody is seen as a flight risk, so the company increases their pay or gives them a promotion because the cost otherwise to them to lose that person would be much higher. Third, being a high performer versus an average performer. Fourth, sometimes it is as simple as asking. It won't likely get you as much of a bump as 1, 2, or 3, but it is a method and works really well when paired with 2 and 3 together. I remember sitting in a meeting when the pay of my peers was accidentally revealed. Yeah, whoops. I was livid, but it was an important lesson. I used it to increase my pay and vowed to never be in a place where I didn't understand what my market rate was again. Fortunately, I was considered a top performer, which allowed me to tee up my request with less friction, which is the goal for you as well. There are 3 methods you should use to research your pay. 1, use websites that collect it. 2, ask coworkers or peers in the industry. 3, inquire and apply to other open positions. If this makes you uncomfortable, I understand. Society has programmed most of us to feel uneasy about this, but you need to do it anyway or else you could be leaving money on the table. Remember that any hesitation around this is just an invisible belief standing in your way, and you need to do it anyway. Push through the resistance and reframe the script. Instead, say something along the lines of, I ensure I am paid for the value I add or the value I bring. For method 1, using websites, I've included links to tools you can use in the workbook for your research. If you have some you recommend and you don't see them there, please let me know. I can update the list. 2 popular tools to use are Glassdoor and levels.fyi. Glassdoor claims to have the most complete market salary information because it's based on thousands of users reporting their real salaries anonymously. I personally like levels.fyi better as it provides some great comparison features, including leveling, which makes this type of research much easier. Levels.fyi, began its focus in the tech industry, but it since has expanded out to other industries. I recommend you check both tools and leverage both if they have the data for you. Each tool is pretty straightforward to use. You'll start by creating a profile. They'd love for you to share your own salary information, but that's up to you. Once you have a profile, you can explore the tools. I'm going to touch on a high level what you can do here, but I recommend you explore and familiarize yourself with each tool and the pay for your role. Users can type in their job title and location and find out what average salaries are in their area for their job title. Here's what this would look like for a director of operations in Burbank. You'll notice a confidence score, which is a good reference to determine how trustworthy the data is, as others have rated its accuracy. My personal experience on this is that the numbers here are close for someone who has been promoted within the company, but on the lower end for someone who has come in from the outside. It's also got a significant range, which makes things a little bit trickier. This is why we will only count on this for one data point and we will correlate it with others. Also keep in mind that the base pay is the median, while the additional pay is inclusive of bonuses. Some of those bonuses may have vesting periods. You'll see on the right what the expected pay trajectory is for the role. For levels.fyi, you can click on one of the job titles below or click on more to see other job titles. You'll find a spreadsheet in the workbook and link below to collect your data. You can also use the notes section if you want to capture your source. I also want to add a few important caveats here as you estimate your own market value. Typically, an employer sets their own internal calculators around these 5 criteria to determine their competitive pay brackets: industry, job title, location, experience level, and job availability or demand. You should do your best to keep your research aligned with these criteria, unless you are familiar enough with your role to know where these roles can be broken. For example, companies in industries like technology and investment banking tend to pay more than other industries. On the location front, some technology companies will pay you more if you're located in a major city where the cost of living is higher versus a small town in the Midwest. And of course, if your role is in demand, it increases your negotiating power. The spreadsheet that I provided is based on the assumption that you are or will be a top performer, since that is your goal and is going to give you greater negotiation power. While this status can often override some of the pay bracket criteria, each company is nuanced in their approach. For example, employers may bracket your pay based on the years of experience that you have, while others use levels based on how you are performing. And some companies may combine both. When you use Glassdoor, you'll notice that they provide a drop-down for years of experience on top of the job level. Just to make sure what I'm saying is clear, here's a visual example of salary structures from levels.fyi. Something else to keep in mind is that a role in one company is not exactly the same as a role in another company. If there are discrepancies in your industry, this is going to require you to dig a bit deeper. Here's a snapshot from levels.fyi, which shows you how an engineering role level may differ across one organization to another. Be sure you take this into consideration when doing your research. As another example, here is a management consultant level. You can use the drop-down to find a comparable role to aid in your research. You'll get better at this, but initially it's going to be more time consuming for you to do it. Just keep in mind that this knowledge will position you well as you move forward. For method 2, ask coworkers and peers in the industry, I recommend doing this judiciously instead of throwing caution to the wind. You don't want rumors of this going back to your boss and then your boss wondering what the heck is going on. Best to do this with trusted folks. I know this may be awkward, but it gets easier, especially when you affiliate with other top performers who acknowledge that this is just part of how they play the game. It's a data point required to maximize their earnings and make decisions. They're usually more open to sharing it. When talking to these peers or colleagues, you can start by sharing that you're assessing your career roadmap and are trying to better understand market values for roles similar to yours, and was hoping they'd be willing to share it in confidentiality with you, and you would do the same in return. You can blame me and say, look, I'm working with a coach. He's amazing, or he's really annoying, and he's asked me to do this exercise where I'm supposed to gather other pay data points to assess my own pay. Part of it is to push me out of my comfort zone since, well, we as a society sometimes keeps us close to our vest, but also because I should be sure I'm getting paid what I'm worth. I'm assuming you'd probably benefit from the same, and I was hoping you'd be open to confidentially exchanging this information. Now, if they seem hesitant, you can add, or even a range would help. Make sure you verify if it includes bonus or benefits so you can properly compare. This data is going to give you a good baseline, but you need to make sure you are thoughtful on how you leverage it later. You don't want to just say, Bob said he makes $5 million, why don't I? You need to be strategic about how this is presented, or else your circle will not be as open to sharing it with you in the future. If you do that, your image may be of the person who swears secrecy and then breaks that oath. At some companies, this is easier than others. Anyone at Netflix, for example, who is a director and above, had pay information for the entire organization. This isn't typical, but it does mean that if you do know somebody at a company that offers more transparency, then it can be easier to assess data points, because you also want to reach out to colleagues outside your company, your industry peers. This may mean those who are in a role similar to you, or those who have access to the information you need. It's best if you can reach them directly, but if not, see if your friend knows someone that they can introduce you to. If not, well, I've had luck in cold messaging on LinkedIn. Let them know that you're doing some research on pay ranges for whatever the role is and the industry, and that you wanted to know if they were open to discussing. They will either say no, ghost you, or say yes by providing it or offering to connect. And guess what? If they offer to connect, congrats. You just grew your network, should you want to foster that relationship, which I think you should. Another technique that relates to this one that I've used and I've seen others use is when you actually apply for a role, and from there, understand what the offer and pay range is. Of course, that requires you get to an offer stage, which I get in itself could be awkward if you're not actually considering leaving. It is going to get you the most competitive data, and the other big benefit to this is it's going to give you the greatest leverage should you decide that you want to use that offer to be able to parlay it into either your increase or another role. Having a competitive offer is sometimes the only way to force off-cycle promotions, and it usually is the one that lights the fire under your employer. You'll have to decide based on your own circumstances how you want to play this. Some companies are going to have a negative response when they find out that their employee is interviewing elsewhere. Yet others know what's happening, and they actually value the data point that comes in when they realize what competitive pay is. As an example, at Netflix, they fully supported it. They saw that as one more data point that they could capture into their system to make sure they were paying top of market. Meanwhile, at Disney, it was different. Disney wasn't always the most competitive when it came to pay. They reasoned that their brand affinity positioned them to not have to compete as much on the salary front. And guess what? It usually worked out well for them. They often didn't counter. That might scare you, but keep in mind, this doesn't mean you lose your job. It does mean that you now have options and a choice to make, which I believe is a great place to be. Let's consider an example from a client of mine. He received an offer of over $80,000 more than his current salary at a competitor. His employer countered with a $10,000 increase. His current employer wasn't going to budge, so he took the external offer at $70,000 as a hefty difference between the two. If you think about this further, over a 2-year period, that's the difference between $20,000 or $140,000, depending on where you are in that range. That's life-changing. I've also seen companies who counter or match or even beat the external offer. You have to choose what is right for you, but you won't have that option if you don't go a-shopping. If you see a job role where they provide you the range, I wouldn't necessarily trust that on its own, because the more comfortable you get with always validating your own market value, the more you're going to earn in the long run. Those who get comfortable using these 3 methods are going to make more in the long run. It's the best way to get a more accurate estimate of your market value. Once you have all this data, you can then average them out. I recommend you get at least 6 data points and no more than 2 from a resource like Glassdoor or levels.fyi. And if you find significant outliers in your data, you may want to just throw it out and gather another. This data will give you more confidence as you tee up your conversation or assess an offer that you've received. Essentially, the free market determines what the results of performing a skill adequately will pay. You'll want to look at the top of that range for a top performer and then assume 5 to 10% above that. For example, if the top end of your research suggests a high-end range of $200,000, then a top performer should feel comfortable asking for $210,000 to $220,000 versus the average employee who may be around $140,000 to $160,000 on average, and assuming a $110,000 to $200,000 range. Your company may argue that the most they can offer is only $180,000, at which point you'll have to consider if you want to push back and negotiate for more or accept it. It is also an opportunity to ask if you can tie an additional bonus if you achieve aggressive targets or perhaps remote work or more vacation or some other different title than what you were going to get. That said, if you are going to push back and if you are going to ask for more, then your odds of success are going to be greater if you are a clear standout top performer, which is what this program is designed to help you with. This is why your pay and negotiation are just one piece of this puzzle, as we want to make sure you are lining up the other components of having the right influencers in your corner, shoring up your weaknesses, and driving massive value to make it easier to say yes to your ask. 2 other points of guidance that can help you in this research. The exercise in your next level role, where you meet with your organization's fast riser, could provide you with some great insights, since they have been where you are and may offer additional assistance and resources. If you are not perceived as a top performer, then achieving the top performer level pay will not be possible. Your conversation with your boss, which we talk about in another module, should prove valuable to understand where you stand and then plan to mitigate those gaps. Don't let your lizard brain shy you away from this effort. Get to work and benefit from this knowledge and the connections you develop when you reach out to others. If it's not already easier for you, you'll find it gets easier and easier as you do it. Top performers are more comfortable talking about their pay because it's part of their identity. It should be part of yours as well. If you get stuck, reach out in the community for some help. Otherwise, I will see you at the top. That's it for this lesson. I hope you found it valuable. If so, this is one of the core lessons from my Career Accelerator system. If you want the full course with the workbook, scripts, and bonus tools, you can get access at careeraccelerator.me. Or you can dive into the next lesson here.